All right, welcome again, finally back to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, it is our first episode after the holidays and the new year. We are in 2025. It is the fourth. We didn't come back on the first, but someone was vacationing and it wasn't me. Uh, but yeah, we're back and we're going to start with a little bit of I was wrong on something professionally early in my career, and I wouldn't want to admit it. And it has to do with New Year's resolutions, and that'll actually take us right into our second topic, which is addiction. And our third topic, we're going to probably scream at the clouds if we have time about religion. So, well, you'll probably Sunday school and I'll scream at the clouds. But I did wear the correct shirt.
Oh, well, I've got my uh, sarcastic comment loading. Please stand by because
Well,
I figured that was appropriate no matter what direction we were going here.
and I know we're saving it because you haven't really looked into it a lot. But the religion one, some of my thoughts actually very much could connect to the New Orleans
Mm.
terror attack because
Oh, I have thoughts.
we have a lot of things around that, and I did kind of want to talk a little bit about timelines over history and the state of Islam today and the state of Christianity today and what makes the big difference.
Mhm.
Yeah. So other than the finer points of the and the different prophet and all of those things, but the state of it as a historical aspect.
Well, where do we want to start?
Well, let's start with
Um,
the I was wrong because
okay.
that'll take us right into the addiction. Because my New Year's resolution was 40 days sober, at least 40 days, which takes us right to the Super Bowl, sober till Super Bowl. And then after that, so we don't slide back into it.
Mhm.
If I can't right after that game go right back into it for the work week, then completely nix for a long time. So we're gonna have a test case after 40 days, and if we can't be at least somewhat restrained, then we know we need longer. So
Well, that was something that I thought was really good. I've referenced this before, but Mike Israetel on Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson.
don't get me started on Israel, by the way. I'm
I
not a
know
big fan.
he he's like who's the guy you really don't like?
Michael Boyle.
No, the strength guy, the barbell strength guy, the old
Oh,
school guy,
Ripito.
Ripito.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a characteristic all they have in common that I think you're going to bring up is he makes absolute statements and poops on everything else. Yeah.
Well, but he also says some really good things. I do think Israetel is better than Ripito in that of,
Mm.
you know, um, he does sometimes makes absolute statements that are, well, hold on a second. No, that works for you and people like you,
It's
but
just not natural, and that's my big problem.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, but he also is better in the, hey, you know, sometimes he will point it out, well, hey, if this is your goal, if that's your goal, what are you doing? What are you capable of? He does do some of that. But I thought one of his better points that he made when they were talking diet and fat loss on Modern Wisdom was not make sure you have a plan for when the diet is over. Like if you are dieting for whatever reason, then there should be a set plan with a set amount of time, like your New Year's resolution, and then there should be a plan for okay, then what?
Hmm.
Because that's why most diets fail is they fail in the then what. And much like why I like Peterson's 12 rules for life is he doesn't just give uh talking points, buzzwords. He actually gives some examples of here is something you can do. Here's something I have done.
Hmm.
Here, you know, you can use this. You can use this, or you can use this as a template to find what works for you. So it's not that. What is the National Day of Failure? Isn't it just like 2 weeks in
Uh, I
the?
I was looking for
Yeah.
articles and I found one, and it's like such and such percent after
Hmm.
2 weeks. Let me find it.
Yeah, and it's actually in the public consciousness. Kudos to them. There's a lot I don't like about Apple, but the new Apple Watch commercial, I don't know if you've seen it because they've been playing it a lot during
Hmm.
football, is they actually talk about the National Day of Failure. And, they're trying to sell you a ridiculously overpriced watch, but I like the idea of, hey, have a system that will help you, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be an $800 watch, but have a system that will help you. Similarly, when we're on, I was wrong. I was slightly wrong. I don't remember how this came up in my brain, but something we have ranted about before is the obnoxious 30-day challenges or the one weird trick. You
Mhm.
know, I hate those. But there is a place for those.
Well, and that's
There,
where I was going with this because earlier in my career, up until I was already working out of my garage, so less than 5 years ago, or about 5 years ago, uh, which so about at least a decade or a little more of my career, I was always the guy, why wait till New Year's? Start now. If you're going to make a change, just do it.
mm-hmm,
Why do we need this? And then I came across on accident listening to random podcasts, and I can't even really tell you which one it was. And then I looked into the source because I didn't know them and looked into the research they were talking about. There's a wealth of research that shows that if you pick a date, if there is a special date for something, you are like 50, 60, 70% more likely to stick with something. And that is a high magnitude. That's just not statistically significant. That's a extreme magnitude of success. And so I just looked it up. I think it was 50% fail after 2 weeks, and then it's down to 18% by March. So those were the dates. Uh, but that's where I was wrong. Why wait? Why? Well, because if you don't have that special day, you're actually less likely to succeed. And if you fail, you're actually less likely to make a change later because you're going to be down on yourself. And when we talk things like, we'll get into this with alcoholism, there's triggers. There's triggers to it. And failure triggers you to do more
mm-hmm,
because you're down on yourself, which makes you stressed. And anything that's dopamine related is more likely to be stimulated when you're stressed to alleviate the internal pain you're feeling. So that's yeah. So to set yourself up for success, it's a good thing with New Year's resolutions. The guy that was talking was even talking about birthdays, and they did a study out of his lab where they sent out uh, turn yourself in to criminals for lesser penalty.
mm,
And they did it on random days and they did it on the criminals' birthdays.
hmm,
And the people who turned themselves in on their were more likely to turn themselves in on their birthday than they would on any other random day. And it was a large sample size and just evenly distributed. So it's, I mean, significant. Dates are significant. In fact, I look back way back, and this should have been a trigger in my head, but I wasn't thinking in this way. When Ben was born, when my son was born, I gained the baby weight with my wife because I had kicked fast food. I was getting down to skinny, and she started craving Jack in the Box. And I would be on my way home from work or school, and can you get me a jumbo jack on the way? And so I'd get her a jumbo jack, and I would make my dinner. And then eventually it became I got her a jumbo jack and then I'd get me something. And then it became sometimes I'd get one for lunch and then I would get her a jumbo jack and get me something. And so I went down that hole and I gained the around 35, 40 pounds with her. I went from about 180 pounds. Well, it was about only 30 pounds, 180 pounds to about 210, but not good 210, flabby 210. And it was my birthday, my 30th birthday, which would have been the next one after he was born. We were out just celebrating the birthday, and I sat down and I felt the fat roll, and I said, "Oh God, I got to do something." And I made the decision on my birthday to do that, and I lost 30 pounds over the next 8 months or so, and gotten probably some of the best shape of my entire life. So yeah, the dates are significant. So that's where I was wrong. The whole just get started now, don't wait till now. If it's way early in the year, if it's like February and they're like, "Oh, next year's New Year's resolution is going to be this," let's find another significant date. When's
yeah.
your birthday? When is your anniversary? When is something? When's your 25-year reunion? Let's put another date in mind to get you going. But if it's December and you're looking at, hey, what am I going to do this year? It actually makes a lot of sense now. So there's I was wrong in my career.
Mm-hmm. Um, that actually reminded me where I get on this, the one weird trick of, okay, I hate the clickbait, but there is an element of truth to that. And it was similarly weight loss. My son gained a ton of weight uh, because he got his thyroid went nuts when he got COVID a couple years ago. Um, like bad. Like I think he's finally off the thyroid medicine, but he gained like 50 pounds. And losing it is difficult. Losing that much weight is difficult in general, but then when you have a wife who likes to bake and much like his mother can eat like she's still in high school and still looks like she's still in high school, okay, that makes it even harder for you. Okay. So I was talking to him about this. And for me, similarly, after I injured my neck and I wasn't drinking, but my addiction was soda. I would sit and I would drink Mountain Dew while I played video games.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm going to bring up sugar too. But
That's a
yeah.
lot of calories while you're not doing anything.
Hmm.
So for me, this the silly but not silly one weird trick was simply, okay, here is a thing, one thing that works for me, which is cutting out the soda. Now, it wasn't that easy because I was drinking like 4 or 5 a day. So I found a method that worked for me, which is the soda goes in the garage because I hate ice. I just like it cold out of the can. All right. Well, that means I only put so many in the fridge a day. So I can only drink so many a day and just start working my way down until there was none. Right. So a system like that that works for you, if you can find a trigger for whatever your addiction or bad habit is. Now,
Well, you also did something that's in the behavioral pattern literature, which
mm,
is creating obstacles. You lessen the obstacles to the good thing, and you create obstacles to the bad thing. And
mhm,
you just, but what you all you did was create an extra step. If you had drunk, say you're down to two, if you had had your two sodas and you're like, I want a third, there's a step you had to take.
mhm,
You had to go to the garage, which, with this thing that I'm doing, I had to completely eliminate everything from the house. I have to have that step of actually going to the store and getting it in order to not do it. This is, I mean,
mhm.
of course, I've been dealing with this for a long time, but it is, yeah, just adding a step. But you're talking about calories. One of the things that got me really, you need things that click in your head. One of my other clients that wanted to do something like this too, we were actually adding up the calories of even clear liquor
Mhm.
and 1.75 liter of vodka, which is going to be your lowest calorie drink. It's got nothing else in it but alcohol, basically, alcohol and distilled water. And uh, a set 1.75 liters, which is a handle, is 3,500 calories. And if you're me in my peak condition when I was about 200 pounds and maybe 10% body fat, that's how much I used in a day as far as my caloric intake, 3,500 calories. That's peak performance. That's not me now. Not at
Mhm.
44 years old and probably about 8% more body fat to be
And still with a
realistic
sore booby.
and still with a sore booby, yeah, and a little atrophy in that right pec. But yeah, so that's a whole day's worth of calories. If you just have one handle a week, you're eating 8 days in one week. So just a little something that kind of kicks things home, not only to
Mhm.
add the effects to your liver and your brain and all of those things.
Well, and this is where the one weird trick clickbait fails is that's not that one weird trick isn't going to work if your addiction is severe.
Hmm.
Okay, this isn't just a man, I really want a Mountain Dew. This is a no, I have to have this thing, or I start to mentally and physically feel bad,
Hmm.
right?
Well, yeah, and that's what we're going to go into on the scientific level. But go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, so then you're going to need to have more significant, it's not going to be one simple, one easy thing. you're going to have to create more significant obstacles and more satisfying rewards in order to help you get through that. It's why severe addicts, drug and alcohol addicts, have to go cold turkey and usually have to have a more complicated system or even go to a facility
Hmm.
in order to come down off of it because
And
it's going to be so difficult.
and this is where I'm going to add a medical disclaimer. This is for educational purposes only. We're only talking about our own experience and things we've seen in our professional lives. If you have a severe addiction, especially to things like alcohol or benzos, seek help because going cold turkey is
Mm,
life threatening in those
mm,
two instances. So uh, I did it, but I also did a wean down before, and I've done this before. And
yeah.
I wasn't, I mean, my own professional advice to myself carries all the liability to my own self. So this is not something you want to take lightly in those situations. Now, sugar is, well, we'll get to sugar. It's an interesting one because uh it's equally as powerful in a lot of ways, as we see with our
Mhm.
obesity epidemic. Uh, but
Well,
but yeah,
before we get into the witchcraft of addiction,
well, I just wanted to
I
share a Jordan Peterson
yeah.
quote on addiction because it goes right along with what you were saying. He was talking to Andrew Huberman, and he said they were talking about the power of addiction, and they were talking about all the major addictions. Uh, and he said, people tell me it's like a monkey on my back, but no, it's like a monster in your head,
Mm,
screaming at you and ripping at your brain,
mhm,
and that's exactly what it feels like. You know, the Anna Lemke, who I didn't put it on the shelf because I noticed it's all blurry back there, but Dopamine Nation,
mm.
she's probably one of the foremost experts on addiction. Fantastic book, easy read, uh, and she's also an easy listen. She talks about the system as like a balance, and it's actually, when you talk about addiction, it's a pleasure pain balance, and it's that spike of pleasure knocks the pain down, but then the pain that your body actually supplies the pain side to correct the balance, but it always overcorrects. And then you have to have abstinence before it'll get back to baseline. So it's an interesting system.
Well, speaking of dopamine, I want to bring up what got me, what gave me this thought in the first place to talk about addiction. But first, as far as is you know layman's terms, systems and plans is before you get to the point where you need medical help, the the idea should be keep it simple, stupid. This is something I was talking to my son about when it comes to working out. I put him through fairly complicated exercise routines, stuff that I learned from you about how to train athletes when he was the captain of the swim team,
Yeah,
because
and
that's what
I
he
would like
needed.
to insert that I kept telling Heath to quit making it so complicated as he was doing that, but
I make it more complicated for myself. That's just my thing. But I've got certifications and studies and experience and a mentor that I can go to for, hey, how do I do this? For you on your own, son, you don't need to do that. You could do something as simple as doing the same couple of exercises every time you work out. Just vary the reps and sets, and you can keep it pretty simple and not overwork yourself. All right. If you've got limited amounts of equipment, oh, I can't work out because I can't do all of these things that we used to do. No, just make it simple. Now, it shouldn't be easy because, as we've said, you want to be uncomfortable. That's the whole point. You
well,
need to
simple and
stress your
easy are
body and mind.
two completely different words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Carrying a
it's
rock
not
up a hill
easy,
is simple, but it's hard.
but it should be simple. Make a system that is simple because it's not going to be easy. Now, what sent me down this train of thought of uh, where things are becoming too easy and too simple is casinos. So somebody I've mentioned before a number of times because he makes me laugh, and I want to go see him live at some point the next time he's in the DFW area, or even down in Houston. I may drag you to him. Dave Landau and his YouTube channel Normal World. Uh, One of his last episodes before they took a Christmas break, he was talking about addiction because he's someone who is in recovery, and he's talked before about how I got over the drugs and alcohol and then fell into gambling because you need your brain, you need that thing, and it's too easy to fall into that. And something he mentioned that I said, whoa, that I'm curious if that is accurate because it sounds true and scary, which is that I'm paraphrasing him here, is that gambling is worse than drugs and alcohol as far as addiction goes because there's no downward slope. It's a cliff. When you come down off of a high, and he was speaking from experience here, when you come down off of a high, there is a gradual falling down. So that dopamine, you're losing that dopamine, but you're losing that high gradually. If you lose it all at the roulette table, you just fell off a cliff. You went from the, oh, dude, I won high, or even, oh, dude, I might win high, that gives you that dopamine kick, to, I just lost everything, like everything. And so he was talking about how that it's even worse as far as addiction goes, because now it might not be worse in that it doesn't necessarily create, this is your wheelhouse. I don't know that it necessarily creates the same chemical problems, the same physical problems
Oh, it
that make
does.
it so difficult to break a drug or alcohol addiction. But I could certainly see how mentally that falling off a cliff makes a lot of sense.
Well, so this is where they're all similar. So you brought up gambling. Most people they talk about when you think of gambling addiction, you usually think of the person at the slot machine. Pull the
The one
lever,
arm
pull the
bandit, yeah.
lever, pull the lever, pull the lever, pull the lever. And that's I mean 40 cents at a time, 25 cents at a time or whatever they have it set to. And it just keeps going and it is a low level and it's the amount. And then it's the taper and then you're done. You're out of money or whatever. It's bedtime and you finally are so tired you can't do it anymore kind of thing. Then you get that you probably fall asleep and then you wake up jonesing for it, you know. But that all at once, yeah, it's going to hit you right then and there. You're going to have that pleasure it's actually going to the roulette table that starts the dopamine. Remember, dopamine isn't just pleasure, it's motivation.
Mm.
That's why a cocaine addict will find a way to get cocaine. They always find a way, whether it's just happen to make friends with people that do it all the time, or they find a dealer even though it's illegal and you know it's really hard to find these things. So this it's that lead up, it's that going to it, and then it's the play, and if you win, it's the pleasure. Now here's why it's similar, because the higher you get, the faster and harder the withdrawal. The more drunk you get, the faster and harder the withdrawal. Roulette is the highest of high you can get because you could put everything on black. Whereas that slot machine, it's 40 cents at a time, 40 cents at a time. Blackjack, it's one hand at a time. It's one hand at a time, unless you go all in. You know, so yeah, the degree to which you do it and how long you've done it determines how far that crash is and how long it lasts. But yeah, it's what was I just bringing? Oh, I wanted to you brought up your son and making it simple. You can also just go to YouTube Real Fitness 7670 and you can have everything you need to get started from our sponsor. Just wanted to throw that in. And
Lots of it's still the best squat video I've seen. Is your I think it's 18 minutes.
yeah, somewhere around there. But yeah, I didn't want to derail us too much, but it was very relevant to what you were saying. I just couldn't get it up in
Mhm.
time to throw it right in there. But but no, no,
Well, you're
but
44 years old, so
that's that pleasure pain balance that Limke talks about.
yeah,
The higher the pleasure gets, the more of the pain. She calls them the gremlins that jump on the scale, jump on there,
yeah.
and then the crash, the higher the when the pleasure is so high, when the gremlins finally jump off, the pain goes through the roof. And it is, I mean, pain is a good description for it. Like Peterson said, it's a monster ripping apart your brain. And
This this popped back into my head when I was driving back home from my parents, because as a slight tangent, ever since I started driving I-35 regularly, which was 1998 when we first went to Oklahoma State, there has been construction on I-35 around Gainesville in North Texas the entire time. Not always the same section, but there is always construction around Gainesville on I-35. That is some kind of grift that is going on, and somebody is getting their bank account padded, but I digress. But the reason it was so noticeable is because when the the big cheap crummy casino there was bought by Wynn and is now the WinStar Casino in South Oklahoma, it gets a ton of traffic now from the DFW area because it's only, depending on traffic, it's an hour and a half, 2 hour drive to get to the casino for the one-armed bandits or slot players or whatever. And they've done a nice job of turning it into the resort, which is part of the gimmick now to get you in. Because no, you're not just gambling. You're not just a one-armed bandit. You're going to see a show. You're going to go hang out at the pool. You're going to stay in a nice hotel room. It's still, and there are so many of these casinos now that it is becoming easier and easier to fall into this. And it was noticeable on the way back because the traffic between the casino and the north part of the metro was ridiculous. And it was a Sunday night. So I figured it was people coming back from their weekend trip to the casino because it's a big ass casino. It's got the casino itself now has two hotels, and there are two smaller hotels near it,
mhm.
independent hotels near it. So, oh, and also a giant pawn shop. Imagine that. So this popped back into my head as I was driving through of, holy crap, this is getting too easy. And that's just one, because you can go the other direction,
Mhm.
up 75 to the Choctaw, which is another huge casino resort.
And if you live out our way, you're not that far from Lake Charles. You can hit the Golden Nugget, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, it's getting easier and easier. And a stat that Landau brought up, and I said, whoa, is that true? And it kind of is true, but then he's making some inferences, um, that I think the number he threw out was every year there are 20,000 single car crashes within 1 mile of a casino. Now, his extrapolation was that's someone who just lost everything and they're running themselves into a tree.
Yeah, well, there's also the fact they give you free drinks while you're there to inhibit
There's a lot
your
of alcohol
judgment a little. Yeah.
and
Well, it's funny because
uh
having been to the casinos in Vegas, they're very slow with the drinks. So you've got to be a
mm,
pretty lightweight to actually get drunk on the free drinks.
mhm.
Uh, but yeah, I digress. Of course, I'm the opposite of a lightweight.
Yeah,
Uh,
because they don't want you drunk, they want you just loosened up.
hmm Yeah.
Yeah, and then yeah. Um, so I did look this up, and holy crap, if you just look up um of uh car crashes within 1 mile of a casino is what I searched for, and like the entire first page is mostly uh journal articles. Now there are a few like the Texas Department of Transportation has a page on it, and there's some, there's like a anti-gambling or anti-gambling addiction site, but most of this is science articles about the ludicrous number of crashes around casinos. And some of them, what they're trying to do is parse out how much of this is alcohol and how much of this is something else.
hmm
But there's definitely enough smoke there to say, yeah, there's a fire of something. It's not just the alcohol. There is probably a significant number of I'm depressed because I just lost everything.
Hmm.
And we are just feeding this and making it bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
mean,
just the
yeah.
casino. That doesn't we have only kind of ranted about um the NFL now is in partnership with gambling apps.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Of course, I know people that are addicted to gambling, and they've gotten themselves in a lot of trouble because of it, and some of them have gotten away with it. But it doesn't matter because trouble or away with it, they still do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they may take a break for a little bit, but then they go right back to it. It's so easy. And ease and intensity are actually probably the two big things because now we look at things like pornography addiction, just scrolling on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
People are addicted to Instagram reels and TikTok. Anything. And here's the general rule. Cannabis. This is the one that's been controversial over the years. Weed's not addictive. Here is the truth. If you're one of those people, anything that feels good is addictive. Anything that rewards you is addictive.
I'll hold my hand up here and say, actually, it's not just feels good, but feels better because I don't like the way I feel on Delta or opioids or whatever, but it does dull the pain
Hmm.
because I do have chronic pain. And so there is a temptation there of, I don't feel good. I don't really like that high, but it's better than being in pain.
Yeah, but the downside to that is when you become addicted to those things,
Mm-hmm.
they cause pain just in of themselves for
Exactly.
not doing it. So now it becomes hard to parse off what's pain from the injury and what's pain from the withdrawal.
Mm-hmm.
And so now this I think this takes us to one of the directions I wanted to go is there's different people have actually specific addictions. Everybody's kind of addicted to something, and there's actually genetic components to what you now you can do something for long enough and end up addicted to it, but there are genetic components to what you might be addicted to. Now, this is where I'm going to stretch it a little bit from the literature because it's kind of new. What the different chemicals do to your dopaminergic system might be the secret. Because let's talk about cocaine and alcohol. Difference there. Cocaine, when you snort you take that hit, it actually attaches to the dopamine receptors in the synapse of the nerve. So the synapse is the space between two nerve cells where the signal goes across a gap to get to the next nerve to send the electrical signal down. And at the next nerve, there's another synapse where it sends uh, a chemical signal to the next nerve, and that just keeps going. So on each side, one releases the chemical, which is the neurotransmitter, dopamine being one of them, and the other has little docking ports where the dopamine will attach to, which causes the signal to go. So dopamine being an excitatory neurotransmitter, which means it stimulates that nerve. There's the other side of that, which is things like GABA and stuff, but that's not important for this discussion. So the cocaine itself actually attaches to them, causing them to act and excite the next nerve. And basically, you're getting this huge stimulus of motivation and excitement. And Wolf on Wall Street. Watch Wolf on Wall Street and see all these high performers on Wall Street were sniffing coke because it made you a go getter. And if you were already a go getter, you were a super go getter. And we got to bump those numbers up, that kind of thing. And but what happens is you actually do release some dopamine, but it has nowhere to go. So it just gets sucked back in or it gets destroyed by the enzymes in that synapse. Uh, and then eventually the previous synapse stops sending the neurotransmitter because what's the use? I just keep losing it, or more is getting destroyed than is getting sucked back in and remade. And so over time, you need more cocaine to get the same stimulus. And then if you get off of it, you have none. And if you have no dopamine, you have no motivation. And if you have no motivation, you have no action. And then you have withdrawals and all of these other things that go through it. So the that's how cocaine works. Alcohol works with the same system, the dopamine system, but what it does is those receptors on the other end of the synapse, the docking stations, they start being sucked in to the nerve cell itself, and there's just less docking stations available. So dopamine's released, but there's only so many places it can go. And so I think that might be the secret to things like that might be the secret to why some people could be an alcoholic but never be a coke addict. Or cannabis does nothing for me. I smoked a little in high school, one time since I've been in this town, and none of the times did it ever do anything for me or I cared for it and even cared to continue. So, uh, gambling, nothing to me. I've played slots once. I'm actually up $500 and I stopped right there and I said, I'm done. Uh, what else? What's sugar? Sugar actually isn't a big deal for me. I can go have a high sugar meal and then actually go back to my high protein diet like that. So, but someone like I have a client, sugar, she'll do the right thing. She'll get on a low carb diet because you need to if you're a sugar addict, get on a low carb diet and she'll do good. She'll do good. And then she starts jonesing and just goes and looks for it. And if she walks through a room where one of her kids left a cookie out or something, she'll black out and eat the cookie. So, it is very specific. And I think the way that it affects the receptors is where the secret is to that. And I hope the
Mm-hmm.
science goes on with that. But yeah.
That's an interesting thought because the hardcore addicts like Landau, I've listened to a number of them and they are addicted. They have a very addictive personality. And a lot of the ones I've listened to talked about, I got over this thing, but then I got into the Alice Cooper. He was in the rock and roll scene and he got into drugs and it was killing him. And he was able to kick that.
Well,
And then
also
he started
alcoholism though,
and then
because
he started
yeah,
drinking.
yeah, because he would talk about how he would have a Budweiser sitting on his nightstand so he can have it first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he kicked the drugs. Good. You're no longer, destroying yourself with cocaine and LSD and whatever else the rock and rollers were using. But now we have a mutual friend from high school who, and this is, of all the things that veterans have a problem with, I don't think we talk about the substance abuse. So we have a mutual friend from high school who his first deployment to Iraq, he's not even a frontline guy. He was an Apache mechanic,
Mhm.
and when he came back and he came over and he was helping us do some stuff on the do some stuff on the house or helping dad do something, and um, he takes out a can of Skull and puts in a dip. Like, when did you start dipping? It's like, oh, when I was in Iraq, because I had to kick my 4 pack a day Marlboro Red habit. Because they need the nicotine to keep going because it is a
Mhm.
very potent stimulant.
Mhm.
And the problem is he talked about, and I've since heard and talked to other people who this has happened to them, is he said he had to be careful because he had friends who tried to do that of let me start doing some dip to wean myself off the cigarettes, and instead they ended up doing both.
Mm. I've known a
And
lot of people that had success with the gum.
mhm. And so I think he was eventually able to kick it, but it was hard during those deployments because long hours, lots of stress, and nicotine is a very potent drug.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's easy to fall into that when you're in a situation, but then also if you have a personality, genetic predisposition, whatever it is, and to your point, hopefully more researchers start going down that rabbit hole to try and figure that out of
Yeah, and it also
You go
might
from
be
one to
based
the
on
next.
it might also be based on why. So is there a trauma
Mm,
response? Are you numbing something, or
yeah.
are you, like you said, trying to stimulate so you can stay awake? Uh, I'll go back to earlier in my career again because this is the Peter Boghossian. He's an ethics professor that used to be Portland State, but an online personality. He uh, he put out a tweet and it said for followers in their 40s, what would you tell people in their 20s that is bad for them that they don't know about yet? Kind of ish, that kind of question. And the first thing I put was how much losing sleep back then affects your life now.
Mm,
And that was the first thing I put. And then I went and commented on my own tweet to add to it. I said, or also how sneakily addiction can happen based on your habits. And both of those connect to caffeine because this might be one of the reasons I ended up in the hospital in 2017. Because you remember when I was running my business, it was up at 3:30 in the morning,
hmm
at the gym till 8 o'clock at night, winding down till 10, and then doing it all over again. So 4.5 hours of sleep, cup of coffee, oh no, shoot down a half a rock star, cup of coffee all the way till about noon, pre workout to get through my workout because I was exhausted. Then the other half of the rock star, and then coast till the end of the shift, and then bourbon till I could fall asleep. And that pattern for about 7 years straight is probably why I ended up in the hospital. But also, it was something we celebrate because I was a go-getter. I was
mm.
working, I was doing this thing, I was putting in the hard work and all of those. So those habits, I was able to get rid of the energy drinks because a heart surgery will get you to do something like that, you know. And then I'm actually down to 2 cups of coffee a day now instead of a whole pot, you know, at a time. So it's yeah, the how sneakily those things come up because I did it because it was necessary. But was it always necessary? Did my schedule get less over time because I had a better reputation and I can pick and choose my clients? Yes. But you still kept doing it till something bad happened. And then you've got to go through the whole period of getting off of it. Luckily, it doesn't seem like I developed a stimulant addiction because 2 cups of coffee is fine. But the other one stuck around. The drinking till you can fall asleep, but you can't sleep without it.
So you've just given me a thought that just popped into my head that this may be a good place to end this little section here of um what is the difference between an addiction and a habit? Because what
I'll tell you the
something
by
we're talking
definition.
about
Yeah.
is, especially what we started talking about, is we're talking about getting into good habits and breaking bad habits. And so would you call a good habit an addiction? Well, I mean, it could be because what you're
Well,
talking about
exercise,
is
people are
being
addicted to exercise. People are addicted to
being that
religion. People are addicted to, yeah.
go-getter,
Yeah.
the Wolf of Wall Street thing, people would praise of, hey, that's, you're building your business, you're succeeding, you're being successful, and you've gotten into all of these habits to help you do that, but then it becomes an addiction, which is a negative thing.
Well, I think the caffeine was a habit, but the alcohol became an addiction. Now, here, well, I guess, yeah, I guess it would be an addiction because by definition, the difference is it becoming harmful to yourself or the people around you?
Mm.
So, yeah, you can have good, healthy habits. And if they're helpful to you, and if they're helpful to the people around you, then it's still a habit. By definition, an addiction is when it becomes harmful to yourself or the people around you. So, like an exercise addiction, exercise is a good habit. Everybody should be doing it. Everybody should be doing it to their maximum potential if you can. But if you go beyond your maximum potential, you increase your risk of injury. You actually have detrimental effects to your body. You have detrimental effects to your relationships. You know, you see the memes where it's like Jim Bro spends 3 hours a day in the gym and has no social life, right? That's not good for anybody. That's not no social
Yeah.
life in itself is bad for the person and it's bad for everybody that's in their social circle. So
Go
it's
watch that documentary on Ronnie Coleman that we've talked about
yeah,
before.
well, yeah, add the drugs and everything to it, you know. Uh, but it's Yeah, that's where it crosses the threshold. Had I been just a general good hard worker, built a business, but came out of it healthier and not in the hospital, that would have been a good thing. Now, could I have done it without all that caffeine? I don't know because I can't go back in time, right?
Mm.
So it's that's the difference by definition. Now, I do want to put one thought out in my I guess my closing thoughts about this because it's important. Modern life makes addiction harder to avoid. All kinds of addiction because, well,
Yeah.
alcohol is readily available. I have been known to make some of my own, but that's a process. If that was all I could drink, you cut my alcohol consumption down by 80% because it takes time and it takes effort. It's that not only is it that extra step you're talking about, but it's a big, giant, tedious step. You know, you've seen the process. And so it's I can just go down the street and I know all the bargain brands. It's not even a big financial investment. It's just it it's easy and I can have everything I need sitting there right, by my room or in the fridge or whatever whenever I want it. Same with social media. You can get a dopamine hit by flipping through your social media anytime you want it. Gambling, like you just brought up,
Freaking
easily to
app.
get
Yeah.
there. Uh, even cannabis and some illicit drugs now. You can just pop over to a legal state and get your gummies and come back. So all the ease of it is uh, is the first part of the equation, and the second part is we have intensified everything so much. Everything is so intense in your face, and the more intense it is, the more intense you need. This is where I'm going to bring in sugar, and this was a very profound thing that Huberman brought up. He said, let's look at sugar and cocaine. Sugar and cocaine are two things that appear naturally in nature, but we have refined them down to a fine powder to where you can get a massive amount of it at once. We have taken the coca plant, which indigenous people have been using for 1,000 years as a mild stimulant, like a cup of coffee, chewing. I think it's chewing on the leaf or something
Yeah.
along those lines. Yeah, as a mild stimulant, and it was probably good for them because being aware in the wild is a good thing. Uh, Sugar, you find a piece of fruit and you eat it. You get some sugar, but the amount of sugar in an apple, especially back before we were farming them into what they are now, was negligible compared to what you can get in one small bite of chocolate, right? So this is actually something we need to look at because cocaine's illegal because it is such a giant hit of that. The addiction comes like that. Refined sugar is just as addictive as cocaine. And we have made it into this thing that is easy to inject into people.
That's not Sam saying that. There's a ton of literature to support that.
Yeah.
The just as addictive as, because I thought that was dumb the first time I heard it.
Well, maybe
And
more
then
because there's legal barriers to the other.
yeah, yeah. Uh there's plenty of literature to support that. And there is one of the problems with unwinding all of that is how complicated our societies have become. Artificially complicated, I would say, because the complication is from top down instead of bottom up. So it's going to make it very like, I like a lot of the things RFK has been saying about the approaches he wants to take with this idea of make America healthy again.
The problem is the
But
growing pains that come along with it. Yeah.
how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
Because there is so much you have to unpack and unwind to do something as simple as getting rid of high fructose corn syrup and going back to cane sugar.
Oh, no, cane sugar is even what I
Ugh.
was talking about. Natural
There,
sweeteners, but not concentrated like actual real fruit juice, that kind of thing. And imagine 90% of the country jonesing all at once. That would be not very productive for a long time.
mhm.
and it would also
Mm-hmm.
create a black market. Could you imagine the sugar black market? So we have to find a responsible way of doing it. And I actually even don't like the top down authoritarian make laws against it approach that they're kind of talking about with some
Mm-hmm.
things. But we need to at least incentivize the public to make better decisions. You know, information is key. People don't know what sugar is actually doing to their body. They're like, I know it's bad for me because it's making me fat, but everybody is like, oh, it's making me fat, and they're thinking about visual. They're thinking about aesthetics. They're thinking about all. They don't know that it's slowly wearing away their blood vessels because it's a toxin in your blood system, in your bloodstream. They don't know it's actually high fructose corn syrup will give you fatty liver faster than alcohol. Okay. So they don't know all of these things. They don't know the implications. We have no informed consent on this. So it's yeah. Now, let me close with future research that I'd like to see done. One thing about addiction is the younger you start, the higher it sticks because your development of your prefrontal cortex creates a scaffold. So by the time you're age 25, you can change your brain through therapy or through just developing good habits or all this thing. You can change your brain, but the scaffold that was put there by the time you're 25 stays the same. So all the changes are based on this scaffold. So what I would like to see is people who started their addictive behavior before they were fully developed versus people who were
Mm-hmm.
after, and the results, because we just give general advice. AA, for instance, abstinence forever, because if you ever touch a drink again, you're going to go right back into it. Uh, but is that the same for someone who binged in college at 18 and 19 and 20 and then became an alcoholic for the rest of their life versus someone like me? I actually really didn't even start drinking till after I was 25. So I don't know what's the difference.
Hmm.
I would love to see somebody work on that. But that's my closing thought. Leave
Well,
some comments.
how do we transition from that?
Uh, that's why I said religion can be addictive. There
Well,
we go.
yeah.
There's our transition.
All right. What is it that prompted you? You sent me a text last week that you were gonna gripe about the Catholic Church in particular. Do you remember what prompted that?
I looked back at the text date and time, and at that time I was probably watching Tulsa King, which is actually a fantastic show for anybody who's looking for a show.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It was something about it was something related to the Catholic Church and endorsing the behavior that was going on, and I was just like, this is the problem. It's political, and I made a comment to uh, one of my clients who's Jehovah's Witness, and we were talking about something, and they don't participate in politics. Uh, as such, they don't vote or do anything along those lines. They pay their taxes. That's about it. Because what render under Caesar is what they always say.
Hmm.
So, you know, and someone made a comment about something, and I brought up the Holy Roman Empire, and I said, and that's why politics ruins everything. Because the Holy Roman Empire is an example of politics meets religion, if you really think about it. And we've seen what that goes with that. So, uh, and the mafia, they actually do justify their actions a lot with their faith and the fact that they can be forgiven if they do this or that, and they're just doing it for the family, and they're creating order. The American mobsters really have in their head that they're creating order in these systems. So that was, I think, what really prompted that text. And I don't know where you want to go with it after that, but
Well, there's here's the problem with human beings being human beings is that my response was, I don't know that the Protestants have done much better. And um an example of that, so one of uh, the producer on the Steve Day show is a conservative Catholic, and he has made some really good points. And even before I started listening to him, I had thought that, I don't I can't go that way because there's too much I disagree with theologically, but I do appreciate and respect the the Catholic tradition of tradition
Hmm.
that and that's one of his points that he makes is look, their traditions can be good, and if they are good, they're important, and it's important to uphold those traditions, and it's more important to understand why they exist, which is something we've ranted about.
Mhm.
But um the the statement he always makes when he is criticizing not Protestantism in general, but its excesses and where it falls off is every man will be a church unto himself. So once you start with the Reformation, where does it stop? And you see that in history. There was no real limiting principle. Now,
Mhm.
subsequently, different denominations have tried to find a limiting principle, but it just kept fracturing and fracturing and fracturing and fracturing. And so there's a reason that Catholicism is still the largest Christian denomination by far.
Have you seen the map of the US on what's the dominant in each region?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I'll try to bring that up while you're finishing this thought.
And and so the when he said that, the verse it always makes me think of is in Judges, um, before Israel gets a king, before Saul is made king, and there's a verse that in those days Israel was without a king, and each man did what was right in his own eyes, which is a problematic translation because especially for modern ears, that sounds like a good thing. Yeah, every man, every person should have a moral compass and strive to do what they think is the right thing. Except that's not really what the verses, if you look at, like if you go to Bible Hub and you scroll down past all the English translations, they have several literal translations, as well as going into word by word in the Hebrew. And a better translation would be each man did what was pleasing in his own eyes. So there was no authority except what you could get away with or what you could enforce. That is a very different thing from doing what is right. Because when we think of right, we think of right and wrong. And it's no, it's what's right for me. It's my truth, as we would say today. Well, that's a problem because there is a such thing as objective truth. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Your perception of reality is your perception of reality. It's not actually reality.
So I just brought up the map here. All of the blue is Catholic, is the dominant denomination, and that green, which is basically the Bible Belt, right there, is Southern Baptist. There's a little blip of there's three states with non-denominational Christian, and then the Mormons take up Utah. What is that?
And Idaho.
Idaho. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so yeah, the dominant denomination of Christianity in the United States is still Catholic, which I grew up in the Catholic Church, so it's, no surprise.
Yeah. And there's a there's also a reason that so many Christian denominations are failing. If you look at numbers, I've brought these up before, but if you look at numbers, they have been declining for years, except the more traditional, conservative, some might say extreme denominations. That there is a movement within the Catholic Church. There's a significant movement to go back to Latin Mass, and that is a section of Catholicism that is growing. When you look at the Protestant denominations, the more conservative like the Church of Christ, where I went and you went for a while. Not the
Mm-hmm.
Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints, that's Mormon, but Mormonism is growing too
Mm-hmm.
because as I think I've said on the show before, they're straight up heretical. And if there's a Mormon out there and you can explain to me how you rationalize Mormonism with Galatians chapter 1, I'm all ears because I've the Mormon missionaries have stopped coming to me because I always ask them that, and I can't ever get a good answer or even an answer. But one thing you can't say about them is that their faith is dead,
Mm-hmm.
because good golly, do they do works, and people notice that. And that is one of the reasons they're one of the few denominations that are actually growing, not just in the US, but around the world, especially because
Well, also their
people see
missionary
these
system is
things.
very intense.
Exactly.
So there's
It
that part.
it is out there, it is visible, and it is worthwhile in the eyes of most people of, hey, you're doing something good. That's meaningful. That means something. I don't remember where I was going with this.
Well, I've got our post hoc segue.
Oh, are we going to go into Islam now?
No, no, our post hoc segue from addiction to this
Oh,
is one of the number one in the literature, uh, what was strategies that has been the most successful for for treating addiction as actually religion. And what do we see? You know, we're talking about the Catholic Church and Baptist and Church of Christ, but we've also got these big mega churches, right? And they're all over the place. And one of the common threads with your typical, what we call born again Christian, is they're typically former addicts. If you really look at the numbers, they're typically former addicts that try to get their life back together. One of the 12 steps is spirituality, and they encourage you to start a faith system, which let's face it, these non-denominational churches, the entry fee is low, i.e. you walk in the door and you and you walk up to the front at the end of the sermon and you say, I want to change my life. So,
yeah, that is actually what's in my head when I was talking about simple but not easy. Is that's an example of making it easy.
well, the Catholic Church, the entry fee is high. Like I said, I grew up in it. You have to go through all the Sunday schools, the confirmations, the first communions.
Judaism,
You have to take tests to do these things.
if you aren't born into it and you want to convert to Judaism, they actively discourage you from doing it.
Yeah, but
That's how
look,
high their entry fee is.
yeah, but look at the behavior of these people. They're the loudest, always telling you how faithful they are, uh, people in the room. It's basically the vegans and the CrossFitters of religion. Uh, because if you don't know somebody's a CrossFitter, wait a second, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
And it's so subbing out, they basically subbed out one addiction for the other. That's why it works. And you know, congratulations, your body's going to be healthier, but is your brain really healthier? Are you going to have a crash later, which we see a lot with that? So yeah, it's maybe, you know, I'm not saying don't take religion as a strategy, but maybe something with a higher entry fee. Right?
Well, does that segue us into
Okay.
Muslims killing people?
No, okay. So yeah, the state of the religion. I actually have a Quran right here. I had to do a book report on that at one point, and this is okay. So now let's go kind of back in history. One of the things you brought up the Reformation and everything, and then we had the printing press, and I think it was it King Alfred of Britain that was the one that basically started the Anglican Church by making it more
No,
accessible to
Henry.
King Henry.
Alfred was you're thinking of the Last Kingdom and Vikings.
Oh, okay.
That was
Yeah.
Alfred.
Yeah. So, but okay. So one of those like mandated that it be more accessible to the
Mm.
common person. And this was important because before that, the leaders of the church determined everything. You weren't reading the Bible, you were hearing what the leaders of the church at the time wanted you to say, wanted you to hear. And that led to things like the Spanish Inquisition, right? So bad things came out of that because bad leaders do bad things because they're human. And that was the state for a while. And then we had this, like you said, the Reformation. We had this moment in time where all of a sudden the common person could see it for themselves and they could make their own decisions. And things got better over time. After that, of course, we had the witch trials and stuff later, but those became more and more pocketed events. And now we have what we have now in the state of Christianity in the world, which is a more Western, but actually, it is a religion of peace. There is nobody using it to their advantage to start another crusade or something along those lines. Islam isn't there yet. This book has nothing in it about any kind of jihad. It's an English translation. If I was to find a radical Islamist, they'd say that's wrong. Those are wrong. Did you get that from a real imam? Because the imams still control the narrative. Even if you know Arabic and you can read it in their native language, they still say you don't know what it means. We have to tell you what it means. And if you follow that faith, you listen to them. The problem is there's many different versions of that all over the world, and there's many different leaders that have different messages, and that's why you have all of these different sects from it. And some of them are what we call Islamists, which are the radical versions, and some of them are Muslims that follow Islam, and they call it the religion of peace. But until they take that next step,
Mm-hmm.
and the common person can decide for themselves, you're always going to have leaders that some of them are going to take the Antifada approach, and some of them are going to be well, no, there's nothing in there about that. We can live in harmony. We're still going to preach to you, just like other religions,
Mm-hmm.
the Church of Latter-day Saints. The problem is people of other faiths can't do that for them. And until the religion of peace people actually stand up to the other ones and make them the minority, we're going to be where we're at.
That was one of my frustrations when that first entered the um uh popular lexicon, the religion of peace. Well, hold on. Um Philosophically, that might be true, but practically it's not. It clearly isn't. But because that entered the lexicon, non-Muslims weren't allowed to criticize Islamic extremism, and it gave an excuse for the actual peaceful Muslims to stay quiet and say, yeah. Well, no, you can say it is a religion of peace, and also say, and those people aren't following it. There
Mm-hmm.
is a big chunk of people. I don't know if you saw it. It was going around X. I saw it yesterday, the day before, a clip of an imam, not in Yemen, not in Iran, not in Ohio,
Oh,
praising
yeah, I know.
October 7th.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
And oh yeah, he's also a professor. Yeah, Gad Sad would say, of course he is.
Yeah. Yeah,
Of course he is.
ideas so stupid it only can happen to an academic. Yeah. It's
Well, we have to be able to talk about these things. Um, you brought up the intensity of our society, that everything is so intense. Annoyingly, that includes our political discourse of we need to be able to talk about serious things, not necessarily dispassionately, but with a lower level of passion, at least.
mm-hmm.
You know, uh, for instance, I don't remember if I talked about this when we were recording or not, but one of the interesting little things that happened on my vacation to Korea is that we flew through Minneapolis because we were flying Delta, and that's a Delta hub. Luckily, because boy, I didn't want to fly to Atlanta. Been there once, never want to go back. Uh, well, if you don't know about Minnesota politics, there's a very large in the Twin Cities, especially a very large Muslim population now. Well, when I we were sitting on the plane, loading, waiting to come back to Dallas, there were at least a half dozen women who came on in full burqas. That's a big red flag and a big effing deal because you do not do that unless you follow a very extreme strain of Islam. And the analogy I thought of, ooh, that's a red flag and that makes me nervous. Oh, well, you're a bigot. No. Let me ask you this, because it's the exact damn same thing of how would you feel if a half dozen people walked onto your plane wearing full KKK hoods, following the Grand Wizard? Would would that make you feel comfortable or would you be concerned? Because it's the same damn thing. And we would not allow that in an airport.
I will steel man the argument against that is that, like I said, there are different. I'll call them denominations. I don't know what the Arabic word would be to the Muslim faith, but there's only one KKK, and there's only one belief system within that. So because we can't discern what faith she follows, the person in the burqa, we don't know.
Well, the counter to that would be that kind of, but most of those people do follow some sort of more extreme Protestant evangelicalism strain of, Baptist or something or other that they profess to follow, and then they have warped it in much the same way that the old Confederates did to justify their slavery.
No, but I'm saying the significance of the garb.
No, but that is my point. Is yeah, in much the same way that a lot of people in the KKK are going to use Bible verses to justify their behavior, it's the same thing with someone who's, you know, walking around, making their wife or daughter walk around in the full burqa, is they're doing the same thing.
Well, I think the difference I'm talking about though is the fact that every other Christian in the United States and probably in the world would see the Klan garb and
Mm-hmm.
say that's not right. Whereas there's nothing going on in the other side, that the religion of peace versus the jihadists, that that is the religion of peace is not condemning the jihadists. They're just
Well,
staying silent and saying, no, that's not what we
yes,
are. They don't represent me. But they're not making them the minority. They're
and
not stigmatizing that own. And realistically, I think it's because of what I brought up. The leaders determine everything. And the people,
mm-hmm.
even if someone, okay, so say some normal, what do you call the person who attends a mosque? Not the leader, but the person who attends. I don't know what the name is. If they said, "Hey, that's wrong. That's not right, and you should stop that," even their own leader would say, "Well, you don't know because you're not me with my training."
And yet the overwhelming majority of Muslims, they just wear the hijab. They don't wear the full burqa.
Mm.
There's a very small minority that wears the full burqa. So by their own actions, they're saying, that's not right. But to your point, how many of them outside of, apostates with prices on their heads, like I just brain farted on her name, Neil Ferguson's wife,
Oh,
the
Ha-
Somali woman,
Ali,
Holly,
yeah.
uh, you know, she has been very vocal for decades, and because of that, there are places she cannot go because her life will literally be in danger.
Hmm.
And this is all coming up because the guy in New Orleans has said that he was inspired by ISIS, I believe is what he said.
Well, yeah, and this is where we got to be careful with this because there's so much fishy stuff about this whole thing. But he had an ISIS flag on the back of his truck, and he was attending a mosque, in Houston here, and the other the mosque issued a statement that basically told their participants to not talk to the cops. Uh, but then there's also stupid things like the mainstream media reporter that gets in the crime scene when there's no crime tape up and gets to go through the whole house, and oh my gosh, there's a Quran open to certain pages sitting on the table,
I
and
haven't gone
oh
down this rabbit hole. Goodness.
yeah, and there's oh look, that's where he was making the pipe bombs, and it's like a clean house except for these little workstations and stuff, and it's like you shouldn't be allowed in there because should be an active crime scene yet. We
Hmm.
have,
Hmm.
yeah, the FBI should be crawling, and that if it was a completely over uh, analyzed crime scene and done with, that book would not be on the table because it would be in a bag somewhere. Those chemicals would not be sitting on the table because someone could walk in and start making a bomb. They would be in a bag somewhere as evidence. Everything, this does not make any sense at all. And
Hmm.
it's like, what are they trying to tell us? And I'm waiting for the Iran talk to come up. Like, oh, these are a reason for us to go to war.
And well, I mean, we've ranted about before. We are becoming a low trust society for this reason. And I'm going to go backwards a ways because this is why in 2015 and 16, everybody unfriended me because I was not voting for Trump. I refused. He did not meet my minimum standards to vote for. But then all my lefty friends got pissed off when I started comparing him to Obama. And so much of the, alternative facts that people lost their mind over, when Trump or whoever spokesman talked about that is, yeah, the Obama administration was doing that. They like to brag that they didn't have any terrorist attacks, but you've run into this when you've gone looking for FBI statistics and they just change the definitions. So they can say, see, violent crime is down or up if they want it to be up for their, narrative. Well, they just change the definitions. So they did that through both Obama terms is there were numerous terrorist attacks, but they were all lone wolf, quote unquote, attacks. So they didn't classify them as terrorist attacks. But Nadal Hassan, the guy who shot up Fort Hood, that was a terrorist attack. That was someone who became radicalized and went on a shooting spree. What is this? Do I want to
This
know?
this is the reporter.
Oh, my stars and garters.
Hold on, let me fix my rookie mistake and share with sound. First of all, this is awful clean video for a crime scene.
You can see that it's been clearly destroyed, the door at least, from the FBI raid yesterday. But if we walk through the home, we see some signs of what he was up to. We have the work area here.
Do you
Lots
see
of
any
different
crime tape anywhere?
chemicals splayed
What
around.
the
um,
effing F?
and different electronics. This is, again, a work setup. Left receipts, just very unkempt in here. If we go over here, actually, you can see the Department of Justice documents here, the search warrant, and the property that they recorded here, which seems to be a lot of chemicals. Again, just left in disarray. There's a bedroom back here, and what appears to be his collection of religious materials, his Qurans, an open Quran with a passage there, as well as even the Bible here, but mostly books on Islam, and his prayer rug just to the left of me here.
That's enough of that.
Oh boy.
So my two worries here is we're going to get the Iran talk, which is the new Russia.
Hmm.
Uh, and the other one is when we talk psyops and stuff. Let me put my tinfoil hat on. Everybody, we talked about the woke right before, and how people are overcorrecting on certain things. This might be used. This might be like bait to get religious Christians to start doing bad things to Muslim people in general by creating this hate, creating this division. Because how did they break up things like Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party? They created infighting all over the country and divided us in certain ways. And I have a feeling that this might be, maybe they had nothing to do with the guy, but they're taking advantage of the situation.
Mm-hmm. I'm not too worried about that because we've been hearing about that for over 20 years now, ever since 9/11.
Yeah, but
And
we use the poke the bear
the
analogy. Yeah.
the only yeah, I mean it could happen. It is something to be on guard for, but if it hasn't happened yet, like the media got in a tizzy after 9/11 about the anti-Muslim backlash, and the video they had was of broken windows in Detroit. It's Detroit, guys. They don't need an excuse.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
constantly broken windows in Detroit.
But the bigger concern here is going back to what I was writing about before, which is we're not allowed to have these conversations, and it is a problem of what we are seeing happening right now in Britain with and if you've seen the memes of people who were given significant jail sentences for saying something unkind on social media versus dude raped a 12-year-old and got community service.
No, the worst one. This is the worst one that I've come across is cops show up. I think the number's 13-year-old girl intoxicated, 7 men raping her, arrested girl for intoxication.
Hadn't heard that one.
Yeah.
Ow. Well, who are the people who are doing these things and where did they come from? And how does that apply here? Well, again, going backwards, because there is a lot of talk right now about mass deportations, and the focus is primarily on Central and South Americans coming across the southern border. I hope in practice it's not just that, because we have had a big problem for decades of asylum seekers, quote unquote, coming from the Middle East because it is so war torn. And the reason I say quote unquote is because, per the UN and international agreements, if you are an actual asylee, you are supposed to go to the nearest safe country.
Mm-hmm.
So why are they all getting on planes and coming to the US? So there. So I got a couple articles here going back to the the 20 teens about the number of refugees admitted to the US, and the Obama administration plans to increase that number to 110,000 in the 2017 fiscal year. So up. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, all right, here's the general number, but now I want to look at a particular case study of the U.S. reaches goal of admitting 10,000 Syrian refugees. Here's where they went. And this is from the New York Times. So this is just Syria when the civil war there really started to kick off during the second Obama term. All right. They had a goal of admitting 10,000 Syrian refugees. Again, if you're a refugee, you're supposed to go to the nearest safe country. Why are they being flown here? Here was something that did not get talked about really at all in the mainstream, the corporate media during that time. While the Obama administration was bending over backwards, not following our rules or the international rules to bring these Syrian refugees here. This is from the Council on Foreign Relations, which is kind of left-ish leaning. It depends on which strain of left or right you're in. But the United States bars Christian, not Muslim refugees from Syria. Is the
And
post.
that actually, I was going to say this could be muddy water, but you answered that already, because I was going to say how many of them were Christian refugees, how many of them were this, how many of them were that, because we also have women wanting to escape Sharia law and all of that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep. The title of this blog post, The United States Plus Christian, Not Muslim Refugees from Syria, will strike many readers as ridiculous, but the numbers tell a different story. The United States has accepted 10,801 Syrian refugees, of whom 56 are Christian. Not 56%, 56 total out of 10,801. That is to say, 1/2 of 1%. The BBC says that 10% of all Syrians are Christian, which would mean 2.2 million Christians. It is quite obvious, and President Obama and Secretary Kerry have acknowledged it, that Middle Eastern Christians are an especially persecuted group. So how is it that 1/2 of 1% of the Syrian refugees we've admitted are Christian, or 56, instead of about 1,000 of the 10,800, or far more, given that they certainly meet the legal definition, which is very true. So there were a lot of annoying people on the right that tried to make a big deal about Obama being a secret Muslim. Um, and I thought that you're distracting from a more important conversation, which is who is Barry Soetoro and where did he come from and where was he raised? For anyone who doesn't know, Barack Obama changed his name when he was adopted by his Indonesian stepfather to Barry Soetoro, and then changed it back when he was going into politics, when he was getting into community organizing. He was raised in a majority Muslim country. Whether or not he's a secret Muslim, he is a, as Dawkins would say, cultural Muslim, perhaps a secular Muslim. If you look at the church he went to, he was certainly a secular Christian because there wasn't a lot of Christian theology being taught there in Chicago. But that was clearly where his sympathies lay. And you saw that in their refugee policy. Now, I forget the number, but Daniel Horowitz, whose podcast is called Conservative View, he's given the number, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's in the millions of people from Muslim majority countries have been admitted to the United States since 9/11.
I think the answer might be more simple than we're going down here. I think, well, because it also corresponds with what I brought up earlier, the Occupy Wall Street and Tea Party. That was during the Obama administration, right? Because we had the housing crash, we had the bailouts, which was what started both of the movements. And the key to breaking up those movements was sowing discord. What better way to sow discord than to move a bunch of people that do not mix very well into basically Western, they do not assimilate well into Western society.
Mm-hmm.
And so what better way than
and put them in enclaves like in Dearborn, Michigan, or in, you know, the I don't remember which suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul is the majority, but put them in enclaves where it makes it easy for them to not assimilate because you don't want them to.
Well, and I did look up the numbers. You brought up Minnesota has a high population of Muslim individuals. It's anywhere from 1% to 3%. The national average is only like 1.5%. So, you know, this whole, we need to adopt this for all of these people. It's the same argument as the trans issue. We're looking at a very small minority. Yes, we have this, the majority protects the minority in Western civilization, but you don't, protecting and bowing are not the same thing. And but yeah, the population is, it seems higher because it's in pockets, but that actually makes it worse because we look at racial integration. Contact theory shows that being around other people of different ethnicities actually makes you more tolerant of them because, oh, they're real people too. But I think the problem is in the Deep South with race relations is you have two pockets next to each other, and tribalism states that you're going to do bad things to the other community, not your own, and you have two racially segregated communities next to each other. And I think that's where the strife comes in, whereas you have some place like South Houston, where not inner city South Houston, but kind of getting to the fringes of South Houston, where everybody's just kind of together and everybody gets along. right? So I think that's the key now that we have these pockets here. Well, the pockets, as I think you've brought up before, they want to make their own laws within these pockets,
Hmm.
and they're adjacent to somebody else who doesn't agree with that. And now we have a tribal situation within these areas. It's not integration, it's put you here and clash.
And you add fuel to the fire with things like this of here we have this presumably Islamic extremist who committed mass murder in a terrorist attack. And what has the Biden administration been saying the whole time? Here's a Politico, not right-leaning article. Biden calls white supremacy, quote, most dangerous terrorist threat, unquote, in speech at Howard University. And this is from 2023, May of 2023. So the whole time, the Justice Department of the Biden administration has been focused on white supremacy and people who show up and get angry at school board meetings. And again, this is why we're in a low trust society, because what about that guy?
Yeah. Well, we're still a high trust society because we still trust each other. What we don't trust
Yes.
is our leadership and the
Yes.
media, and which is working its way to bringing us down that road. I mean, it didn't happen overnight in other places either. I mean, uh, current Russia, which is it, it's better than it was when it was communist, but
Mm-hmm.
it took a while for all of that to sit, and then it took totalitarian leadership for a long time for it to become basically in the genes. And we were
Mm-hmm.
on the verge of that, I think, and I think we could actually alleviate that now. So, uh, but yeah, it is worse than it was, but I think we're still a high trust society because if I walk down the street, I can go talk to my neighbor and not
Mm-hmm.
have to worry that they're telling me the truth or not. Because they have, it's are you conforming or are you telling me what you think, right? Now, I think let me bring a contrast to what I just said about the pockets next to each other. This is one place where I see a completely different result from this, and that is actually one of the good things about academia because people come from all over the world to go to American universities and they integrate. You're in class with a person of a different faith. There's one gal, Northern Africa. I'm trying to remember which one, but she was Muslim, and she's like the sweetest girl in the class, right? And very genuine and very
Mm-hmm.
curious and all of. And it's like it's a different environment because it's not a class where it's not a system where a group of people can come in and completely segregate themselves the entire time. They have to integrate. They're forced to assimilate to Western culture to be in these classrooms. Now, I don't know what's happening with that professor up north, if he created or if he was already radical and he just got to that position. But yeah, it's a different environment and you see the different result that comes from it. And
And that is
everybody's
what is
human
so
to each other.
toxic and damning about the DEI movement of, well, we're resegregating ourselves.
Again, cause discord. This all
Mm-hmm.
started, well, it didn't, it started in academia, but what happened is the administration under Obama and the leaders of all these giant banks that just got bailed out and were being protested against shook hands with those people that had this segregationist ideology. And all of a sudden, leaders for Occupy were showing up and segregating everybody, and the whole movement broke apart.
Yep.
It's all part of the plan.
Yep. That was my concern with the reaction to James Lindsay and the woke right and the oh look, it's already starting to fracture. We just won the election and now it's already starting to fracture.
Well,
And
look at
hasn't even
the
sworn in yet.
yeah, look at the attempts on pulling apart Musk and Trump too.
Mm.
What's the thing? Oh, we found this one thing they don't agree on, and they tried to make it the biggest story in the country, which was the HB1 or H1B.
H1B visas,
Yeah,
yeah.
H1B visas.
They're special technical visa work visas.
Yeah. And so they
Yeah.
tried to make it the biggest news story in the country because it could potentially break up this new administration. And they're doing the same thing with RFK because they're putting in the limelight the difference of opinion on the jab because they know Trump actually still is very proud of Operation Warp Speed. So they're trying to use that to create rifts. They're just trying to create rifts, so discord. And hopefully we're too smart for that now, but me and you are, but everybody else. Egos are
We'll
involved,
see.
and that makes
Yeah.
everything, you know.
It is still hard to tell how much is what is real and what is just noise, because even though they are dying, the corporate media is still has a lot of reach, has a lot of influence, and they may be in their death throes, but that doesn't mean they still can't cause damage.
So this is not an accusation. I'm going to put a disclaimer here. Someone could clip me on it, even though we're not important enough. I had this random thought at 2 a.m. this morning about James Lindsay, because what happened with Occupy and using DEI and the woke movement was the Democratic Party jumped on the tiger. And what happened with the Biden administration is they couldn't get off the tiger.
Mm.
And he came in, he was one of the major voices in breaking that tiger apart and creating a situation where they could get off the tiger, which they're, I think, slowly working towards. There's still a lot of, I mean, this is going to be a process because there's too many
Yeah.
people in power that are the tiger on that side.
Yeah.
But when we talk about it's the establishment versus the populace, now it almost seems like because he broke that tiger down, he's creating the tiger on the other side to protect the establishment right, because the tiger on the other side only destroys the populist right, the woke right movement. And I'm like, what if he's part of the establishment? That's not an accusation. If you ever come across it, it's just a weird thought, because it's just, if you aren't, you might kind of be being guided indirectly by your online interaction to actually end up with that result. So something to chew on if you ever hear this. But
Well, there's a thought.
yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've yelled at the clouds enough.
Yep.
I've got some work to do outside before it starts raining. So we will see y'all next time for, I think we still have a few Wheel of Time thoughts before we shift that to something else. I think we were going to talk about madness.
Yes, I believe that was the case.
Yeah, because I had some questions and thoughts on Rand's channeling sickness and his madness and the connection there. And why did the channeling sickness suddenly stop? So how much of that was connected to his madness and where was that coming from?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some curious rabbit holes to go down there.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time.